Hello and welcome to Nuts and Bolts. Great to have you here on this Valentine's Day. So happy Valentine's Day for all those out there, but it's fantastic to have you all here on Nuts and Bolts. We've got a great session with you today, and it's all about that bossy co-worker that you have to deal with. So, you know, that co-worker or that peer that seems to think that they're the boss and they're not, and they like to boss you around. So we're going to talk about that and the 4 ways that you can handle it and make some changes to try and alleviate the situation. So we're going to talk about that today. So I hope you're all ready to go. I know I am. But first off, I wanted to tell you about a story of how this sort of impacted me. So when I was in the early days of my military career, I was a corporal in the military, and I used to work with a gentleman who was the same level as me. So he wasn't higher, he was the same level as me. But because he'd been that rank for longer, he seemed to think that that gave him an entitlement to boss me around and tell me what I needed to do. And he wasn't, he was the same level. So people would come into the office and ask him something, and he'd say, "I'll ask my secretary," and point to me. So he'd be really, really demeaning like that. And I don't think he meant it intentionally, but the impact that it had on me is it made me feel like I had to defend myself all the time. And let me tell you, I wasn't overly constructive in that defense either. So there was probably times where I could have said or done things a little bit differently to alleviate that situation without, you know, causing conflict. So anyway, so I know that there's people out there that might be suffering from this. They might have a peer or a co-worker who's bossing them around a little bit, telling them what to do, putting themselves in a situation where they think they're a bit of the boss and they're not the boss. So if you're in this situation, I'm going to give you some 4 tips that you can use right now, today, to try and help alleviate that situation. So hopefully you'll be able to glean some information and be a little bit more constructive than I was back in the day. All right, so I'm going to share my screen with you, and hopefully you'll be able to see this. Fantastic. Here I am down the bottom here. So, okay, my peer thinks he's the boss and he is not. So have you got that peer, and if we put it diplomatically, has a hard time keeping his or her leadership tendencies in check? So they might have been with the company for a while longer than you, or they might have had a higher level position and then drop back down again for whatever reason, but they're still keeping that power play or that sense of elevation. And it makes it really, really difficult for you because you find yourself wanting to stride out and do things, and you're getting this continual sort of feedback saying, "Oh, don't do it that way, and you can't do that, or why don't you do this?" And you know what I mean? And there's a fine line between peers being really, really helpful and supportive and peers that are just being plain bossy. So we're going to talk about that today and talk about how you can try and change that situation a little bit. And it is really frustrating to deal with this day in, day out, because it grates on you to the point where you almost become paranoid, and everything they say, you take it as almost like an insult. So we have to step onto it fairly early before it gets to the point where you're going to be non-constructive like I was. All right, so let's go. So what's the first thing you can do? So in the moment, you can say something, and you can say it in a constructive way. So, you know, you can say things like, do you know what? Thanks you for your feedback, but I've got a different idea that I'm going to use. Or you can say, you know what? Thanks for your support in this, but I'm going to take a really active role in this particular task, so I'm going to make up my own mind for that. So you can say things that sort of push back, but do it in a really constructive manner. Okay, so say something in the moment, and every time you say something will make them realize that their help is actually unwarranted and it's probably a bit over the top. So sometimes it's a situation where they may say something and they don't realize the impact of that. So for example, if they stand up and say, "Right, okay, we've got this task on, so here's what we're going to do, they don't realize how bossy that's coming across. So, you know, in that moment, you can say, "Do you know what? You've got some good ideas there, but I've also got some good ideas, and I'm going to go my way. You go your way, and we'll see how we go." You know, so you can actually put it in there. "No, I don't think I'm going to do that. Thank you for your input." You know, so say something in the moment. So have some little sentences ready to go. It could be, I've got a different idea from that, but thanks anyway. Thanks for your input, but I'm going to do something a bit different. I'd like to play a more active role in this task, so I'm going to go in this direction. You know, those sorts of things. So think of little sentences that you can, you know, spit out whenever you need, whenever you find yourself in the moment. So it's a really constructive way to say, you're encroaching on my space here, okay? So speak up in the moment if you can, because it really makes a difference moving forward, because they'll have less tendency to drag you along, and it almost gives them the realization that, hey, you know, you're being a bit bossy. All right, so see how you go with that. The other thing that you need to do, if that's not working, if you've done it for a little while, you need to schedule a chat. And I'm not talking about raising your voice or being non-constructive or, you know, any of those sorts of things. It's about having a really candid, robust conversation about the impact that it's got on you. So avoid statements that start with you. You're being really bossy. You're wrong in this circumstance because such and such. You're doing this, that, and the other. It's more about saying, look, I appreciate you taking the time to share your best interests with me. However, I found success with going with plan A, B, and C. And if I hit a roadblock, I'll be sure to reach out to the team for suggestions. So you're not going to say you're going to reach out for them personally for suggestions. You're going to reach out to the team for suggestions. So this does a couple of things. So not only does it drive the discussion that you'll want feedback when you're seeking it and not any other time, and it also says to them that they're an equal member of the team. So you'll be seeking out support from the team, and he or she is one of the team members. Not specifically you're going to seek out them for support, okay? So you would say, I appreciate you taking the time to share your best interests with me. However, in the past, I've found A, B, and C works really well for me. And if I find myself having a roadblock or a bit of a barrier, I'll reach out to the team for some support. Okay, so number one, you're putting them in their place a little bit with regards to, you know, back off, I want to do this on my own. And number two, you're stating the fact that you'll reach out to the whole team for support if you feel you need it, not that particular person. So I hope that helps. It's really, really important to have this chat. If you're going to struggle with this, and sometimes it can be fairly confrontational, but again, you're not going to use those you words, you did this, you made me feel that, or you did this. At this stage, it's just a chat to say, thanks for your input. I do appreciate it. However, what I'm going to do is this. So I'm going to go down this train because it's actually worked for me before. If I find any roadblocks, if I'm having struggles, then I'll reach out to the team and then just leave it at that and just go, okay, fantastic, walk away. So that's a one-on-one chat that you wouldn't have with people around, okay? All right, so what else can we do? So this is where you can back up your peers. So say you're in a meeting and, you know, the bossy one is coming in and answering all the questions and talking over people or undermining or whatever they might be doing. If one of your other peers says, oh, I might do A, B, C, and if this bossy one goes, oh, no, that's never worked before, didn't do it, it's time to back up your peers and say, actually, what Sally just said has got validity and I'd like to hear more of it. So what you're doing is you're saying everybody has a voice and I want to hear everybody's voice. So try and back up your peers if you possibly can. If you've got that bossy co-worker coming in and said, oh, bloody Sally, she's going to do this, that, and the other. I told her not to do it. I don't think she could do it. This is your chance to say, actually, Sally talked to me about that and I thought it was a great idea. So what you're doing is you're not validating what they're doing. You're pulling away from it. You're pushing back on it. And you're saying everybody has a chance to have a voice and everybody has got a difference of opinion and it doesn't necessarily mean they're wrong or right. So back up your peers when you possibly can and they'll start getting the hint that, you know what, there's other people except for just me that are finding you a little bit overwhelming or overbearing. So try and do that. Remember to back up your peers if you possibly can. Don't back them up if you don't agree with them, but if you think, oh, there's validity in that statement, or there's validity in that thought or insight or whatever it may be, then make sure you say out loud that I think that's got validity, that comment, and I think we should explore it further. So you're backing up your peers. Last but not least, if that's not working, so you've already had a few comments on the trot. So as you're going, if they're coming up and being bossy, you're pushing back. You're pulling them aside and having a little quiet chat about, hey, listen, if I need your help, I will ask for it. I'll reach out to the team and get the help that I need. But right now, I just need to do this because I want to build my own capability in it. If that's not working, still, while you're doing that, making sure you're backing up your peers as well. So if they've got something out of the ordinary, if they're challenging the status quo with something and the bossy one is saying, no, that'll never work, back them up. Say, well, why don't we give it a go? I think it's a great idea. Okay. And the last thing you want to do is talk to your boss. Now, when I say talk to your boss, you're not going to go up to your boss and say, oh, Joe's really bossy. He's driving everyone crazy. He thinks he's the boss. Okay. So you don't want to throw your peer under the bus. What you want to say to your boss are things like, I'm looking for opportunities of growth and professional development, and I want to go further. So I'd like to take a lead on more projects. So what steps would you suggest I take? Because let me tell you, the boss probably likes Joe being a bit bossy, because Joe's pulling everybody up and getting them in line. And Joe's probably going to your boss and saying, hey, I'm looking after Sally. I know she's new around here, but I've got your back. Don't worry, I'll look after her. So your boss has got 100 other things to do and he thinks that's all settled, right? So what you've got to realise is you've got to let the boss know that, hey, I don't need to be micromanaged by one of my peers. I actually want to grow, develop, build my capability, do all those sorts of things, and I want to do it in my own volition. So you'll say things like, I want to take more leads on a project, so tell me how I can do that. You might say things like, I'd like to make a more substantive contributions to the meetings, but I often feel that there's not enough space for my opinion in the meetings, so can you suggest how I could have a more active role? So you're really not focusing on Joe, the bossy one. You're focusing on you, on how you can have more presence. Either way, that alerts the boss to the fact that the current dynamics of the team is being impactful for you, because you're saying I don't feel there's space for me to have my opinion, and I'd really like to do more of that because I've got some great insights and ideas. So tell me how I can do that. So what you're doing is alerting them to the fact is at the moment, the group dynamic is not allowing for new ideas, is not allowing for feedback, is not allowing for, different insights and challenging the status quo. And that's going to be mindful for that person, that boss, and they're going to be watching that in future. So don't throw Joe under the bus. Just focus on yourself when you talk to your boss about what you want, about what you want to do, how you want to move forward. Okay, so if after a while nothing changes, then it might be a different discussion that you have with your boss. And that's okay, because you've already gone to him and said, hey, boss, I want to go further. I want to contribute more, but I don't feel like my opinion's being heard. I need to, know some ideas on how I can do that. You've already gone to them, got some advice, got some feedback. You go back, you utilise that feedback, you're trying your best. Mr. Bossy Joe over here is still not giving you an inch. That's where you would have another conversation and say, hey, boss, I've actually talked to Joe. I'm struggling with getting my opinion because Joe's very opinionated, and I find that every opinion I have is getting superseded or undermined. I've had a chat to Joe and told him that he really doesn't need to keep micromanaging me. I've also, had a one-on-one conversation with him about that. I've come to you to ask for help. Nothing's changed. So then it needs to be elevated even further. But hopefully you won't get to that point. Hopefully if you're putting your hand up and saying, thanks, Joe, for your input, but actually this has worked for me before, so I'm going to do it this way. A couple of those should nip it in the bud. If it doesn't, have a one-on-one conversation and say to that person, I will reach out to the team if I need support, but you really don't have to keep chasing me down, telling me things, so that they know that they're on an equal par with the rest of the team. If that doesn't work, go to the boss. How can I get my opinion noted? How can I share my insights? Tell me what's the best ways I can do that. so that they can realise that the group dynamics is probably stemming that a little bit. And if those three don't work, then it is another conversation with the boss saying, I've done all your suggestions, nothing's working, I'm still getting undermined and I'm not getting listened to. So I think the boss needs to know it at that stage. So I hope that helps. And hopefully you won't get to that fourth or fifth stage where you're having that second conversation with the boss. Hopefully after a couple of realizations that, you know, you've put your hand up and pushed back a little bit in a really constructive way. Don't do what I did and start screaming and shouting. It doesn't do anybody any good, and it's very, very confrontational. So try and, you're going to be emotive because at this stage you're going to be frustrated, you're going to be sick of it, you're going to be a bit paranoid about things going on, you're not going to want to move forward. So try and manage those emotions when you're having a chat to Bossy Joe, okay? Try and manage them to the point where you're not elevating your voice, you're not getting teary or upset, you're not, you know, try and manage them to a point where you can have a constructive conversation, push back, and then keep moving forward. The response you're going to get is Joe's going to be a little bit taken back, because usually people that are bossy think that they're doing everyone a favour. They're doing it with good intentions. They think they're helping, but in fact they're being the opposite. They're not being very helpful at all. So hopefully with those little subtle hints of saying it in the moment, we'll be able to make them realise that they need to have a little bit of a softer approach and perhaps take people on a journey with them, not drag them kicking and screaming. Maybe that would work better for them. All right, so I hope that helps. So we've all got somebody in the workplace at some point or other. You might not have it now, you might have had it in the past, where one of your peers feels like they're the boss. Try these 4 tips. If you get to the 5th one and you have to go and see that the boss a second time, you know, it's just what we have to do if nothing changes. So I hope that helps. I hope that will alleviate some of the issues that you're dealing with. Remember, try and make it constructive as much as you possibly can, because you don't want it to be elevated into a point where you're struggling to have a relationship with Bossy Joe. Okay, it might be just his personality is a bit like that, or, you know, they're trying their best, but they're just doing it in the wrong way. So hope that helps. Make sure you tune in for next week. We've got a beauty session on next week, so make sure you tune in with us then. But until then, have a fantastic Valentine's Day, and I will speak to you all next week. Take care. Bye for now. Cheers.